The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of St. Michael's Cathedral, where hundreds of guests filled the wooden pews. Sophia Chen stood before the ornate mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection showing a beautiful woman in an ivory silk gown that cost more than her family's annual income. Her dark hair was styled in elegant curls, adorned with tiny pearls that caught the light. Yet despite her stunning appearance, her brown eyes held no joy, only resignation. 3 years had passed since that day, but Sophia remembered every detail with crystal clarity. She had walked down the aisle alone, her father having passed away. When she was just 16, the guests whispered among themselves, some commenting on her beauty, others questioning Julian Blackstone's choice of bride. Julian himself had stood at the altar like a statue, his tall frame imposing in his custom black tuxedo, his steel-gray eyes showing no emotion as she approached. The wedding had been a grand affair, as expected from one of the city's most powerful families. The Blackstone estate had been transformed into a fairy tale setting with thousands of white roses, crystal chandeliers, and enough champagne to fill a swimming pool. Yet for all its beauty, the ceremony felt hollow. When Julian slipped the platinum ring onto her finger, his touch was cold and mechanical. When they shared their first kiss, as husband and wife, it lasted barely 2 seconds. It's more of a formality than an expression of love. Life in the golden cage, now 3 years later. Sophia sat in the breakfast room of the Blackstone mansion, stirring her coffee absently as she watched the rain streak down the French doors. The house was magnificent, with its marble floors, priceless artwork, and rooms so large that her voice would echo when she called out. Yet it felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful but lifeless. Julian had already left for his office. At Blackstone Technologies, the empire he had built from the ground up after inheriting a modest software company from his father. He was brilliant, there was no denying that. At 34, he was worth over $3 billion and was considered one of the most eligible bachelors before their marriage. The irony was not lost on Sophia that even after marriage, many still considered him available. Mrs. Grace, the elderly housekeeper who had worked for the Blackstone family for over 20 years, entered the room carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She was the only person in the house who treated Sophia with genuine warmth, perhaps because she understood what it meant to be an outsider in this world of wealth and privilege. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Grace said softly, refilling Sophia's cup. "You barely touched your breakfast again. You need to eat something." Sophia managed a small smile. "I'm not very hungry, Mrs. Grace, but thank you for caring." The older woman's eyes filled with concern. She had watched Sophia grow thinner over the past year, her natural radiance dimming like a flower deprived of sunlight. "Mrs. Blackstone, if you don't mind me saying, you seem sad lately. It's more than usual." Sophia's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "I'm fine, really. Just tired." But Mrs. Grace wasn't fooled. She had seen the way Julian treated his wife like a piece of furniture that served no real purpose. She had witnessed Sophia's attempts to connect with her husband, only to be met with polite indifference or complete dismissal. It broke her heart to see such a kind soul slowly withering away. The art teacher's heart before her marriage. Sophia had been an art teacher at Lincoln Elementary School. She had loved working with children, watching their faces light up when they discovered they could create something beautiful with their own hands. Her small apartment had been filled with her artwork, colorful drawings that brought more joy to her walls than any expensive painting ever could. Julian had insisted she quit her job after the wedding. "Blackstone wives don't work," he had said matter-of-factly. It would reflect poorly on the family image. So Sophia had given up the career she loved, along with the sense of purpose it had given her. Now she spent her days in the mansions library reading countless books to escape her lonely reality. She had tried to redecorate some of the rooms to make them feel more welcoming, but Julian had quickly vetoed her suggestions. "The house is fine as it is," he had said coldly. It was designed by the best architects in the country. Sometimes she would paint in the small studio Julian had reluctantly allowed her to set up in one of the guest rooms. Her canvases were filled with scenes of children playing, couples holding hands, families laughing together. All the things she longed for but didn't have. Memories of a father's promise. Julian's father, Robert Blackstone, had been Sophia's father's closest friend since childhood. Both men had grown up in the same modest neighborhood before taking very different paths in life. While Robert built a business empire, David Chen had become a dedicated teacher, choosing fulfillment over fortune. When David was diagnosed with terminal cancer, Robert had visited him in the hospital every day. It was during one of these visits that David had asked his old friend for an impossible favor. "Robert," David had whispered, his voice weak but determined, "Sophia will be alone when I'm gone. She's too trusting, too kind for this harsh world. Promise me you'll look after her." Robert had agreed without hesitation, but fate had other plans. Just 6 months after David's death, Robert himself suffered a massive heart attack. On his deathbed, he had called Julian to his side. "Son," Robert had said, gripping Julian's hand with surprising strength, "I made a promise to an old friend. Sophia Chen needs protection, needs family. She's a good girl, Julian. Marry her, give her a home, a name. It's the right thing to do." Julian had wanted to refuse, but he could never deny his father anything. At 31, he was focused entirely on expanding the family business. Love and marriage were luxuries he couldn't afford, distractions from his goals. But a promise was a promise, especially one made to a dying father. The distance between hearts, their daily routine, had become predictable over the 3 years. Julian would leave for work before Sophia woke up, returning late in the evening to have a silent dinner in the formal dining room. They would sit at opposite ends of the long mahogany table, the space between them feeling like an ocean. Sophia had tried countless times to bridge that gap. She had learned to cook his favorite dishes, though they employed a full kitchen staff. She had read business magazines to understand his work, hoping to engage him in conversation. She had even attended charity galas and business functions as the perfect society wife, smiling gracefully while feeling invisible beside him. But Julian remained unmoved by her efforts. He was polite but distant, treating her more like a houseguest than a wife. They had separate bedrooms, separate lives, separate worlds that occasionally intersected but never merged. The hardest part 4. Sophia was seeing glimpses of the man Julian could be. Sometimes she would catch him staring out the window with a sad expression, or she would hear him laugh during phone calls with his business partners. In those moments, she saw someone capable of warmth and joy, someone she could love, if only he would let her. The loneliness grows as the rain continued to fall outside. Sophia finished her coffee and decided to visit the rose garden. It was the one place in the mansion where she felt somewhat at peace. The gardener, an elderly man named Thomas, had become another unlikely friend. He would tell her stories about the flowers while she helped him tend to them, finding comfort in nurturing something beautiful. "Roses need care and attention to bloom," Thomas had once told her while they worked together. "Without love, they wither and die, no matter how perfect the soil or how grand the garden." His words had stayed with her, and she wondered if she was like those roses, slowly dying from lack of love and attention. She was fed, housed, and clothed in the finest things money could buy, but her heart was starving. That evening, Julian returned home later than usual. Sophia had prepared his favorite meal, hoping tonight might be different. She had set candles on the dining table and chosen a soft blue dress he had once complimented years ago. When he entered the dining room, he barely glanced at the romantic setting she had created. "I've already eaten," he said simply, loosening his tie. "I had a business dinner." Sophia felt her heart sink, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "Of course. I should have called to check." Julian paused at the doorway, and for a moment, she thought he might say something kind, might notice her effort. Instead, he simply nodded and headed to his study. Leaving her alone with the flickering candles and untouched meal, Mrs. Grace found her there an hour later, quietly clearing the table with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, my dear child," the housekeeper whispered, pulling Sophia into a gentle embrace. "You can't keep doing this to yourself." But Sophia didn't know any other way to be. She had been raised to believe that love was patient and kind, that it could overcome any obstacle. She had hoped that somehow, someday, Julian would see past the arrangement that brought them together and recognize the woman who truly cared for him. As she prepared for another night alone in her beautiful but empty bedroom, Sophia wondered how much longer she could continue living this half-life, loving someone who seemed incapable of loving her back. The rain continued to fall, matching the tears she no longer bothered to hide. 6 months after that lonely dinner with the flickering candles, Sophia made a decision that would change everything. Despite Julian's objections, she had quietly taken a job at the Riverside Art Gallery downtown. The gallery owner, Mrs. Catherine Wells, was an elderly woman who had known Sophia's father and remembered her artistic talents from years past. "Your father would be proud," Mrs. Wells had said, when Sophia nervously approached her about the position. "Art has a way of healing broken souls, dear. I think this place needs your gentle touch." The gallery became Sophia's sanctuary. Surrounded by beautiful paintings and sculptures, she felt alive again for the first time in years. She helped customers understand the stories behind each piece, organized exhibitions for local artists, and even began displaying some of her own work in a small corner section. Julian had been furious when he discovered her job. "I told you, Blackstone wives don't work," he had said coldly during one of their rare conversations. "What will people think? Maybe they'll think I'm a person with my own dreams and talents," Sophia had replied quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. Julian had stared at her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable, before turning away without another word. It was the first time she had ever stood up to him, and something inside her had shifted that day. The return of an old friend on a crisp autumn morning. While Sophia was arranging a display of watercolor paintings, the gallery bell chimed. As someone entered, she looked up to see a tall man with kind brown eyes and a warm smile that she recognized immediately. "Oliver Park," she whispered. Her heart skipping a beat. Oliver had been her closest friend in college, the one person who truly understood her love for art and her gentle nature. They had lost touch after graduation when he moved to Chicago for medical school, but now here he was, looking successful and confident in his doctor's coat. "Sophia Chen," he said, his face lighting up with genuine joy. Or should I say Mrs. Blackstone now? "I heard about your marriage." They spent the next hour catching up, sharing stories about their lives over the past decade. Oliver had become a pediatric surgeon at the city's children's hospital, and his passion for helping young patients reminded Sophia of the compassionate man she had once known. "You look beautiful but different," Oliver observed as they sat in the gallery's small cafe area. "There's something sad in your eyes that wasn't there before." Sophia looked down at her hands, twisting the platinum wedding ring that felt heavier each day. "Marriage changes people, I suppose. Does it make you happy?" Oliver asked gently. The simple question hit her like a physical blow. Happiness had become such a foreign concept that she had almost forgotten what it felt like. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Board meeting running late. Don't wait for dinner." Oliver noticed her expression as she read the message. "He doesn't know how lucky he is," he said softly. Growing closer over the following weeks, Oliver began visiting the gallery regularly. Sometimes he would stop by during his lunch breaks from the hospital, bringing coffee and pastries to share with Sophia. Other times he would come in the evenings, genuinely interested in the art and enjoying long conversations about everything from classical paintings to modern sculptures. Sophia found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. Oliver made her laugh in ways she had forgotten were possible. He listened when she spoke, asked her opinions, and treated her like her thoughts and feelings mattered. One evening, as they stood before a painting of a sunset over a lavender field, Oliver turned to her with a serious expression. "Sophia, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never forgot you. All these years I've wondered what might have happened if I hadn't left for Chicago, if I had been brave enough to tell you how I felt back then." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Oliver, I'm married." "I know," he said, stepping closer but not touching her. "But are you truly living, or are you just existing in a beautiful prison?" His words struck deep because they voiced the truth she had been trying to ignore. She was existing, not living. Going through the motions of a life that felt nothing like her own. Julian's growing suspicion, meanwhile. Julian had begun to notice changes in his wife. She smiled more often, hummed softly while reading in the library, and seemed to have a new energy about her.
At first,
He had attributed it to her job at the gallery, which annoyed him but wasn't worth another argument. But then Emma Rodriguez, his childhood friend and now a successful lawyer, mentioned seeing Sophia with a man at a downtown cafe. They looked quite cozy, Emma had said during their weekly business lunch. I thought you should know, Julian. I've always looked out for you. Emma had harbored feelings for Julian since they were teenagers, and she had never approved of his marriage to Sophia. She saw the art teacher as beneath Julian's social standing and unworthy of the Blackstone name. Who was he? Julian asked, trying to keep his voice casual. I asked around. Dr. Oliver Park, pediatric surgeon at Children's Memorial, apparently. They knew each other in college. That evening, Julian found himself paying attention to Sophia in ways he hadn't in years. She was on the phone when he arrived home, her voice animated and happy as she spoke to someone. I'll see you tomorrow then, she was saying as she ended the call, not noticing Julian standing in the doorway. Who was that? He asked, surprising himself with the sharp edge in his voice. Sophia turned, startled. A friend from the gallery. We're planning an exhibition for next month. Julian studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only the same gentle honesty that had always characterized her. Yet something about her manner unsettled him in ways he couldn't name. The confrontation, the breaking point came. On a rainy Thursday evening, Julian had left work early, intending to surprise Sophia by actually joining her for dinner. When he arrived at the gallery to pick her up, he saw her through the window, standing close to a tall man with kind eyes. Oliver was helping Sophia hang a new painting, his hand guiding hers as they positioned it on the wall. They were laughing about something, their faces close together, completely absorbed in their task and each other. Julian felt something he had never experienced before, a burning sensation in his chest that made him want to storm into the gallery and demand explanations. Instead, he stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching his wife's face glow with happiness in the presence of another man. When Sophia finally emerged from the gallery, she was surprised to find Julian waiting by his car. Julian, what are you doing here? I thought I'd drive you home, he said stiffly. Who is that man? Dr. Oliver Park. He's a friend who's interested in supporting local artists. Sophia's answer was truthful but incomplete, and Julian sensed the omission. The drive home was tense and silent. In the mansion's foyer, Julian finally confronted her. How long has this been going on? He demanded. What do you mean? Don't play innocent, Sophia. Emma saw you with him at a cafe. I saw you together tonight. You're having an affair.
out.
Sophia stared at him in shock. An affair? Julian Oliver is my friend. We talk about art and books and life. Things that married couples usually discuss, but we never have. So you admit you've been seeing him behind my back. I've been living my life, Sophia said, her voice growing stronger. Something I stopped doing when I married you. Julian's face darkened. Gave you everything. This house, clothes, jewelry, status. What more do you want? I want to be seen, Sophia said, tears streaming down her cheeks. I want to be heard. I want to matter to someone. For 3 years, I've tried to be the perfect wife, but you treat me like I'm invisible. You're being dramatic. Am I Sophia's? Voice cracked with emotion. When was the last time you asked how my day was? When did you last tell me I looked nice, or share a meal with me, or even say good morning? When did you last touch me, Julian? Not as an obligation, but because you wanted to? Julian stood silent, unable to answer because the truth was he had never done any of those things. The decision to leave that night, Sophia lay awake staring at the ceiling of her lonely bedroom. She thought about Oliver's words, about Mrs. Grace's worried looks, about the woman she used to be before she became Mrs. Julian Blackstone. The next morning, she made a decision that terrified and liberated her in equal measure. She found Julian in his study, already dressed for work despite the early hour. I'm leaving, she said simply. Julian looked up from his computer, his expression unreadable. Going somewhere with your friend? I'm leaving you, Julian. Our marriage. This house. Everything. For the first time in years, Julian seemed genuinely shocked You can't leave. I can, and I am. I've been dying slowly in this beautiful prison, and I won't do it anymore. Where will you go? You have nothing without me. Sophia smiled sadly. I have something you'll never understand. I have hope. Hope that somewhere out there is a life where I'm valued, where my heart matters. Julian stood abruptly. This is about him, isn't it? That doctor? This is about me, Sophia said firmly. About choosing to live instead of merely existing. She turned to leave, but Julian's voice stopped her. Sophia. His voice was softer than she had heard it in years. I tried. What if things changed? She looked back at him, and for a moment, she saw not the cold billionaire, but a lost man who might have forgotten how to feel. It's too late, Julian. I can't keep waiting for someday. Moving forward within a week, Sophia had moved into a small apartment near the gallery. Mrs. Grace had cried when she left. Pressing an envelope of her own savings into Sophia's hands, despite her protests. You've given me more kindness than I ever found in that mansion, Sophia had told the older woman. Thank you for being my friend. Julian returned home that evening to find the house emptier than it had ever been. Her art supplies were gone. From the guest room studio, books were missing from the library shelves. Even her small touches throughout the house had vanished. Leaving everything perfect and cold and lifeless, he stood in the doorway of her former bedroom looking at the space where her things used to be. For the first time since his father's death, Julian Blackstone felt completely alone. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he had locked away years ago, something began to crack open. Something that felt dangerously like regret. 6 months had passed since Sophia left the Blackstone mansion, and Julian felt like he was losing his mind. The house that had once been his sanctuary now felt like a tomb. Every room held memories of her quiet presence, from the library where she used to read by the window to the kitchen, where she would hum softly while helping Mrs. Grace prepare meals. His work suffered for the first time in his life, during board meetings. He would find himself staring out the window, wondering what Sophia was doing. His assistant had to remind him of appointments. His usually sharp business instincts seemed dulled by a constant ache in his chest that he refused to name. Mrs. Grace had become increasingly bold in her comments about his behavior. She was the best thing that ever happened to this house. The housekeeper said one morning as she served his untouched breakfast, "And you let her walk away?" "I didn't let her do anything," Julian replied coldly. "She chose to leave." "Because you gave her no reason to stay," Mrs. Grace said, her voice sharper than usual. "That girl loved you with everything she had, Miss Julian. She tried for 3 years to reach your heart. And you acted like she was made of glass, something pretty to look at but never touch." Julian pushed his plate away and left for work without another word, but Mrs. Grace's accusations followed him throughout the day. Learning about love that evening, Julian found himself driving past the art gallery where Sophia worked. Through the window, he could see her arranging flowers in a vase, her face peaceful and content. Looked healthier than she had in years, her cheeks rosy and her movements confident as he watched. Oliver Park entered the gallery, carrying takeout bags and 2 cups of coffee. Sophia's face lit up when she saw him, and she smiled in a way that made Julian's heart clench painfully.
Oliver said something that made her laugh.
The sound carrying through the glass and hitting Julian like a physical blow. This was what happiness looked like on Sophia's face. This was what he had never given her. Julian drove home in a daze, finally understanding what he had lost. It wasn't just a wife who cooked his meals and kept his house beautiful. It wasn't just a companion for business, functions, and social events. He had lost a woman who would have loved him completely if he had let her. Emma's interference the next week. Emma Rodriguez appeared at Julian's office with news that made his blood run cold. "I thought you should know," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Oliver Park has been looking at engagement rings. My friend works at Cartier and saw him examining their collection yesterday." Julian felt the world tilt beneath him. "Are you certain?" "Quite certain. He's planning to propose, Julian. If you have any feelings for Sophia at all, you need to act now." Emma's words were calculated to push Julian into action, but not for altruistic reasons. She had been in love with Julian since they were teenagers and saw Sophia's absence as her opportunity to finally win his heart. If she could help destroy any chance of Julian reconciling with his wife, perhaps he would finally see Emma as more than just a friend. "What do you suggest I do?" Julian asked, his voice hoarse. "Fight for her," Emma said, though the words tasted bitter in her mouth. "If you love her, don't let another man take her away." That night, Julian stood in Sophia's former bedroom, surrounded by the ghosts of Midavines. For the first time in his adult life, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his emotions. The pain of losing her, the regret of wasted years, and underneath it all, the terrifying realization that he loved Sophia Chen with a depth that shocked him. The grand gesture. Julian's first attempt to win Sophia back was typically dramatic and completely wrong. He sent a massive bouquet of red roses to the gallery with a card that read, "Come home. We can work this out."
Sophia called him that afternoon,
her voice tired but firm. "Julian, you can't buy me back with flowers. Then what do you want?" Asked desperately. "I want you to understand that love isn't a business transaction. It's not something you can negotiate or purchase. It's something you feel and express and nurture every single day." Julian was silent for a long moment. "I don't know how to do that." "I know," Sophia said softly. "That's the problem." After she hung up, Julian sat in his office staring at the phone. He had built a billion-dollar empire through strategy and determination. But he had no idea how to win back the heart of the woman he loved, learning to be human, desperate for guidance. Julian did something he had never done before. He sought help. His first stop was Mrs. Grace, who listened to his fumbling attempts to express his feelings with a mixture of sympathy and exasperation. "Love isn't about grand gestures, Mr. Julian," she explained patiently. "It's about seeing the person truly, caring about their happiness more than your own comfort." "How do I show her that?" "Start by learning who she really is. Not the wife you expected her to be, but the woman she actually is." Julian spent the next weeks researching Sophia like she was a business acquisition, but with a completely different goal. He visited her old school and spoke with former colleagues who remembered her kindness and dedication. He read books about art, trying to understand her passion. He even visited the children's hospital where she used to volunteer, seeing firsthand the impact of her gentle spirit. Slowly, a picture emerged of a woman he had never bothered to know. Sophia wasn't just beautiful and accomplished. She was compassionate, creative, strong in ways he was only beginning to understand. The real competition, meanwhile, Oliver Park was indeed planning to propose. He had fallen in love with Sophia. All over again, drawn to her resilience and grace. She had been honest about her marriage and her pain. And Oliver wanted nothing more than to give her the love and respect she deserved. "I know you're not ready now," he told her one evening as they walked through the park near her apartment. "But I want you to know that when you are ready to love again, I'll be here." Sophia squeezed his hand gratefully. Oliver had become her anchor during the difficult transition from a married woman to independent person. He made her feel valued and heard everything Julian never had. But late at night, alone in her small apartment, Sophia still thought about her husband. Not the cold, distant man he had become, but glimpses of who he might be underneath all that armor. She remembered the way his eyes had softened when she told him she was leaving, the vulnerability in his voice when he asked if things could change. The turning point. Julian's breakthrough came during an unexpected encounter at the children's hospital. He had gone there to make a donation in Sophia's name, hoping to understand her volunteer work. While waiting to meet with the administrator, he witnessed something that changed everything. A little girl was crying in the waiting room, clutching a broken doll. Without thinking, Julian approached her. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "My dolly is broken," the girl sobbed. Her arm came off. Julian looked at the doll, remembering suddenly how Sophia used to repair broken toys for the children she taught. He had watched her once, years ago, carefully sewing a teddy bear's ear back on while humming softly. "Maybe we can fix her," Julian said, surprising himself. He spent the next hour with the little girl, using his handkerchief to create a makeshift sling for the doll's arm. when the girl's mother found them. Daughter was giggling as Julian told her stories about brave dolls who became even stronger. After being repaired? Thank you, the mother said, tears in her eyes. She's been so scared about her surgery tomorrow, but you've made her smile. As Julian watched them walk away, he finally understood what Sophia had tried to tell him. Love wasn't about providing material things. It was about being present, about caring enough to sit on a hospital floor and comfort a frightened child. The true confession that evening. Julian appeared at Sophia's apartment with no flowers, no gifts, just himself and words he had never spoken. I need to tell you something, he said when she opened the door, looking surprised and wary. Julian, it's late. Please, just 5 minutes. Sophia stepped aside, and Julian entered the small but cozy space she had created. Artwork covered the walls, and books were scattered on every surface. It felt warm and alive. Everything there. Mansion had never been. I went to the children's hospital today, Julian began. I met a little girl with a broken doll, and I helped fix it. For the first time in years, I felt like I did something that mattered. Sophia watched him carefully, seeing something different in his expression. I've been thinking about what you said, about being seen and heard, Julian continued. I realized I never asked about your dreams because I was afraid they might not include me. I never shared a meal with you because I was terrified of what we might talk about. I never touched you because I knew that if I did, I might actually fall in love with you, and love felt like weakness. Tears were streaming down Sophia's cheeks now. Julian, I was wrong about everything, he said, his voice breaking. Love isn't weakness. Living without it is. I've been dead for 3 years, Sophia. You brought life into our house, into my world, and I was too scared and stupid to see it. He took a shaky breath. I know I have no right to ask this, but if there's any part of you that could forgive me, any chance you could teach me how to love you the way you deserve, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become the man worthy of your heart. The choice of Sophia stood silently for a long moment, her heart torn between the pain of the past and the hope she saw in Julian's eyes. This was the man she had glimpsed occasionally over the years, the one she had always believed, existed beneath the cold exterior. I can't go back to the way things were, she said finally. Julian's face fell. I understand. But Sophia continued, maybe we could start over. Not as the people we were forced to become, but as who we really are. Julian looked up, hope flickering in his gray eyes. What does that mean? It means you take me on a real date. It means you tell me about your dreams and fears and listen to mine. It means we build something new, something real, without the weight of duty and obligation. Julian nodded eagerly. Yes, anything you want. And Julian, Sophia said, stepping closer, it means you have to compete for my heart. Oliver is a good man who cares about me. If you want me to choose you, you have to show me every day that you're worth choosing. The new beginning 6 months later, Julian and Sophia stood once again in St. Michael's Cathedral, but this time, everything was different. The church was filled with people who truly loved them. Mrs. Grace. Oliver Park, who had graciously stepped aside when he saw Julian's transformation. Colleagues from the gallery and children from Sophia's former school. This time. When Julian looked at Sophia walking down the aisle, his eyes were full of love and wonder. This time, when they kissed, it was soft and tender and full of promise. Emma Rodriguez was notably absent. Having finally accepted that Julian's heart belonged completely to his wife, I love you, Julian, whispered against Sophia's lips as they were pronounced husband and wife for the second time. I love you too, Sophia replied, and this time she truly meant it. Their first dance was to a song Julian had spent weeks learning to play on the piano, a melody Sophia had hummed in those early lonely days. As they swayed together, Sophia could hardly believe this was the same man who had once treated her like a beautiful stranger. What changed? She asked him as they danced. Julian smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. I learned that the best investment I ever made wasn't in stocks or real estate. It was in loving you. As the song ended and their guests applauded, Julian and Sophia knew they were finally beginning the marriage they both deserved. Not one built on duty and obligation, but on choice and love, and the promise of tomorrow. In the audience, Mrs. Grace wiped away happy tears, grateful that the two people she loved most had finally found their way to each other. The mansion that had once felt like a beautiful prison became a warm home filled with laughter, art, and the kind of love that grows stronger with each passing day. And Julian Blackstone, the man who had once thought love was a luxury he couldn't afford, learned that it was actually the only thing that made life worth living.